Several weeks ago, Betsy sang that song, and I could not get it out of my mind. I talked to Jim recently. I said, boy, what a great song if you choose. Now, you don't tell Jim Van Meter to do anything, but you just leave him a loud suggestion. I said, if you choose to use that on Mother's Day, that would be a great song. For the cause of Christ. That's why we do what we do. Yesterday, I was in Tallahassee. I was speaking. There was a meeting mostly of athletes and people that are part of a small college there. And Kez McCorvey was one of the speakers. Kez was wide receiver at Florida State several years ago, and then he played in the pros. Mickey Andrews, who was the defensive coordinator at Florida State during that time, also was one of the speakers. And Mickey and I were together with Charlie Ward, Heisman Trophy winner, about 5 years ago, and they invited us back to this clinic to speak. And it was interesting because I got to hear the rest of Mickey's story. I heard part of it 5 years ago, but Kez told about, or Mickey told 5 years ago about his wife dying. Diane had just passed away of cancer. And what Mickey did is his wife was an only child. And so he called his mother-in-law and he said, look, I want to invite you to come and live with me. And he said, I didn't know what I was doing at the time. But I asked her to come, and he said, you know what I learned? Every morning when I get up to have breakfast, it's like looking at my wife. He said their personalities are different, but there are so many similarities. And he said, boy, God just blessed that. So when I was talking to Mickey yesterday, he told me that recently his mother-in-law passed away, and I thought about how sad that must be and lonely. Of course, Mickey still has a daughter. In fact, she flew into Tallahassee yesterday. But one of the neat things was listening to Kez. And boy, let me tell you something. As a football team, I do not like Florida State. But I'm going to tell you this. I love what Bobby Bowden stands for, and I love what Mickey Andrews stands for. The reason a lot of us don't like them is because they beat us so much. And now Mickey, good thing about it is, for all you Alabama folks, if you'll remember, he played at Alabama on 2 national championship teams. And then he coached on a national championship team at Livingston, and then he coached on 2 national championship teams at Florida State. He has 5 national championship rings and doesn't wear any jewelry at all. In fact, that was the story he told 5 years ago. His wife asked him one day, said, why don't you wear your red wing? He'd lost his first one. He got another one. He said, I didn't know where that one was either. And he looked at her and he said, Diane, I don't need a ring to remind me that I'm married. But when she died, he put on his wedding ring. It was just an interesting story. Apparently, he found it. But I listened to Kez. Kez came from a tough background. He hardly knew his dad, came from Pascagoula, Mississippi, if y'all don't know that. Played football with a little-known guy named Shane Matthews and a couple of other NFL players. Later became NFL players in high school. And of course, obviously, in Mississippi, they won the state championship. But he said his mother had to go to work as a welder in order to provide for their family. He said, but when I went to Florida State, Diane Andrews was my mother. And there are a lot of people in this place. You may not be a mother to natural children, but you've been a mother to a whole lot of kids. Yeah, I think of Barbara Everett. Barbara's never had any children of her own. But you know what? She and Terry did an incredible job of ministering to our girls when they were young. When they didn't have any grandparents around, they became almost to them grandparents. And there are a lot of other people that are in that situation. You're special to God, to your family, and to this world. In John, there are several stories that I want to talk about this morning that I believe helps you understand women in Jesus' world. I mean, I want you to see and be reminded how he reacted to women. Because it is radically different than what has happened in the societies of the world. The first thing that I want to talk about is in John, the 2nd chapter, and it's where Jesus works a miracle for his mother. Now, that looks like a small thing. Let's read about it. But I want to tell you the big part. I've shared this before, but I want to share it again on Mother's Day. Here's what it says. In John 2, beginning in verse 1, it says, "On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now, both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, 'They have no wine.' And Jesus said," by the way, when he says this word, woman, it would be for us to say, "Dear woman." I mean, not like we say, "Woman?" No, that's not it. If that's what you're thinking, you have missed the translation. He was saying, "Dear woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour hasn't come yet." And his mother, understanding, of course, that he was going to do exactly what she asked him to do, said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Well, you know the end of the story. The wedding feast, if the wine ran out, everybody decided that marriage was a failure. And so they're right on the cusp of this couple not having a successful life, never being recognized as a couple together, always being thought of as the couple that got jinxed in English terms. And Mary steps in and asks Jesus to do something, and he does it. He turns the water into wine. The feast continues. The marriage is saved. But the story you don't read is a story that Jesus was actually telling. Up to this point, he was basically anonymous except his disciples and to his family. Outside of that, virtually no one knew who he was. And when he replies and says, "Dear woman, you don't understand. My time hasn't come yet. What you're asking me to do," and here's what he's really saying, "Mother, I want to share something with you. If I do this, and I'm going to, if I do this, then our relationship will never be the same. Those times where you and I will be able to be together and be alone are over. Those opportunities for us to just have mother and son time have ended, because from this point on, everybody will surround me everywhere I go." And that's exactly what happened. His total relationship to his mother changed after that, because from that point on, everywhere he went, the crowds followed. But you know what? She was willing to risk that for the couple, and he was willing to risk it to help his mother. There's another story, and it's in the 4th chapter. And it's where Jesus witnesses to the Samaritan woman. This starts in verse 5 in the 4th chapter. You've already figured it out by now. We're going to stay in John, so just keep your Bible open. We'll just flip pages as we go, or keep your cell phone refreshed, or keep your iPad on. Whichever translation or version you use. But in verse 5 of the 4th chapter, it says that Jesus came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat by the well, and it was about noon. A woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said, "Give me a drink." Well, his disciples had gone away to the city to buy food. By the way, if a woman comes to the well at noon, it's because she's done a lot of stuff wrong, and she had to get away from the crowds. She had to be there basically when nobody else was there. So the woman of Samaria said, "How is it you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan? Jews don't have any dealings with Samaritans." And Jesus said, "Well, if you knew the gift of God," by the way, Samaritans, a couple of things. First of all, they were abusive to the Jews. And the second thing is that they were considered half-breeds to the Jews. Jesus says, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, "Give me a drink," you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Here comes the witness. He just saw an opportunity and just jumped right into it. And the woman said, "Sir, I don't have anything to draw with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock?" And Jesus said, "Whoever drinks of this water is going to thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up to eternal life." Well, this is also one of those stories that you just don't see it when you read it. Because Jesus is talking to this woman. She shows up at noon. He understands in his spirit that something's going to take place, and he sends his disciples to buy food. He understands where he is. And he understands that there may be an opportunity to witness in the middle of all this. And you know what he's surrounded with? 12 bigots. And he didn't want to deal with it. Now, you don't believe he's surrounded with 12 bigots? Read what happens when they come back. What happens when they come back? They say, "What in the world is he talking to this Samaritan woman for?" Well, that's what they said in their spirit. Now, he knew what they were thinking in their hearts. That's why he sent them away to start with. And then they said, "Oh, well, it's time for lunch." And Jesus said, "I'm not hungry." He said, "Wait a minute. You sent us all. Where did you get the food?" And Jesus says, "You know what my food is? To do the will of my Father." Listen, folks, just plainly put, he sent those 12 bigots to go buy food so he could witness to that woman. And she had a lot of problems, as you find out as you continue to read the story. Go and call your husband. "Well, I don't have a husband." You're right, but you had 5. Oh boy. Here's somebody that knows everything I've done. Hey, let me just share something with you. He knows everything you've done too. And everything I've done. Sometimes we think we're hiding things from him. No. So he witnesses to this woman, wants her to have eternal life, and is willing to do whatever it takes to get her into the kingdom. It didn't matter what she had done, he still loved her. Boy, what a lesson to women in this world today. It doesn't matter what any woman has done, Jesus still loves you. Period. Well, there's another story. It takes place in the 11th chapter of John. So we'll just go over a few more pages. And I'm going to skip around. I'm going to start in verse 1 and go through 3, and then I'm going to jump to 17 and go through 20, and then I'm going to jump to 31. Now, if you've got a real Bible, that's going to be easy to follow, but it's going to be tough if you've got to click to get there. So my staff always loved that when I told them it was Lawrence and the kids at Vaughan Forest. And they all had their iPads and their iPhones, but I always carried the real Bible. But anyway, says that there was a certain man who was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and his sister Martha. And it was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil, wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, "Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick." And then verse 17. When Jesus came, he found out that Lazarus, first of all, he was already dead. He'd been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brothers. This is what you call professional mourners. By the way, they still have them. People that get paid to come and mourn with you. Now Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, in verse 20, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Now jump to 31. It says, the Jews that were with her in the house, the professional mourners, and comforting her, I don't know how, when they saw that Mary rose up and quickly went out, followed her, saying, she's going to the tomb to weep there. We've got to go and weep with her if that's where she's going. And when Mary came from where Jesus was, and she saw him, when she came where Jesus was and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. You know why he groaned in the spirit? Do you know what happened last time he saw Mary? There are two women in the house. One of them's Martha, and she is the one who's getting the food ready and getting busy doing stuff. Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus listening. And Martha gets all upset and says, why does she get to sit there? Why? I need her to help me get the food ready. I need her to help me clean the house. And Jesus said, Martha, you know what? What you're doing is okay, but what she's doing is what is needful. This is what's most important at this moment. Now, fast forward. Lazarus dies. And here's Mary, who is sitting at the feet of Jesus, that he was so impressed with, is surrounded by professional mourners, and she's sitting there wanting to know, why in the world didn't you come? And Jesus is grieved in his spirit. You know the next thing that happens? Shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. Folks, he didn't weep over Lazarus. Why would he weep over Lazarus? He's getting ready to raise him from the dead. He understands that. He's weeping over Mary. He's weeping for Mary over Lazarus. Because she's gone from this person that was sitting at his feet listening to him to somebody who is distressed because her brother's gone. Martha actually left the professional mourners and goes to Jesus, which is an interesting story nobody tells. That Martha that people often are so critical about that was taking care of the business of the house. And by the way, I'm very careful about how I talk about Martha, because I remember the first time I ever preached on this, I was at First Baptist Aniana, and a staff wife came up to me after the service, and however I preached on it, it wasn't good to her. And she said, boy, if it wasn't for us Marthas, you guys would be in trouble. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be very careful how I talk about Martha in the future. But so, for all of you Marthas, I'm getting ready to say something good about you. It was Martha that got up and left Mary and the professional mourners to go to Jesus first. Mary didn't go till later. And she goes with the professional mourners, and they're ready to sit down and weep with her. And Jesus is sitting there just thinking, oh my goodness, Mary, why in the world did you bring this crowd with you? You don't need this. And he wept. Then he raised Lazarus. Well, there's something else takes place in John 19, so let's keep on moving. It's Jesus on the cross. And he literally wills his mother to John when he's on the cross. Look here. There stood by the cross of Jesus his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved, that's John, standing by, he said to his mother, "Dear woman, behold your son." And to the disciple he said, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, that disciple took her into his home. Now imagine dying on a cruel cross. You have spent the better part of 2/3 of a day being ridiculed, slapped, beaten, stuff thrown at you, hung on a cross, people talking about you, again, ridiculing you, and in the middle of all that, Jesus says, you know what? There's one thing I still need to do. I need to finish my will. And he literally gives his last will and testament, and it's taking care of his mother. This is what I want you to do, John. Mary, John's going to take care of you. And John took his mother into his home. Let me ask you a question. What kind of special blessing do you think John got when he got to heaven? I can tell you it is going to approximate the blessing that Mickey Andrews is going to get when he gets to heaven. God's called us to a work, and sometimes it involves reaching out in ways that we don't even know. But you know what? I believe Jesus' worth of women is greatest seen when he selects a woman to be his first evangelist. And that's another part that almost nobody talks about. I want you just to flip over to one more page. In chapter 20, in verse 14, the resurrected Jesus is standing there. Mary, not his mother, is standing outside the tomb. And she sees someone and she wants to know where Jesus has been. And in verse 14, it says, now when she had said this, she turned around, she saw Jesus standing there and did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, dear woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. And Jesus said, Mary. And boy, when he called her name, she turned, she said, Rabboni, which means teacher. And Jesus says, look, don't cling to me, for I've not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord and that he had spoken these things to her. The first witness to the resurrection was a woman. A woman that he had reached, a woman who had followed him, and a woman who had gone to the tomb to minister to what she thought was a dead body. And she met the resurrected Jesus. If you don't already know this, it's one of the greatest evidences that the Bible is true. Because a woman was not allowed to be a witness to anything without two men. It took two men to say that what she's saying is the truth. There weren't two men there. There was only Mary. And Jesus says to her, in essence, you go be a witness to the men. He would never have done that. They would never have written that if this were a made-up story, folks. They would have written some man came to the tomb and he went back and told the disciples. That's what they would have written. They would have never said that. In that society, that would never have taken place. In our society, it's somewhat unusual, but not really unusual. But I can tell you this. If you go back and put yourself in the time and the place and what was going on in that day, it's totally different. And Jesus says to Mary, you go tell the men that I'm risen. We live in a world where, unfortunately, there are a lot of women who think they have no worth. There are young women who are following gangs, they're following drugs, and they're killing themselves because they don't think they have any worth. There are young adult women who are doing things that are incredibly bad. It's killing their future and it's killing their lives because they don't think they have any worth. There are median adult women who are doing things and not doing things because they don't think they have any worth. And one of the things I'm trying to say to you is put your eyes on Jesus. Listen, I believe that the greatest encouragement that a woman can receive is to see in her life how valuable she is to Jesus. Our young women are looking to others to give them their value because somebody didn't tell them how valuable they are to Jesus. Our median adult women are looking to all kinds of things for their value because nobody's told them how valuable they are to Jesus. Listen, when a woman gets to a place that she understands how valuable she is to Jesus, knowing this is going to lead her, first of all, to follow Him. She's not going to need all that other stuff. She'll follow Him. She'll forsake her sin. She'll forgive others. She'll forget her past. And she will forge a bright future. And I want to say to every woman in this room, that's exactly what Jesus wants out of your life. He wants you to follow Him. He wants you to forsake sin, just like He told the woman at the well. He says, look, I'm not condemning you. Or the woman caught in adultery, I'm not condemning you. Don't keep on sinning. And it will cause you to forgive. I promise you there are women in this room right now who have been hurt in ways I can't even imagine. But you're being blocked from being used or being freed up because you can't quite forgive. Come to the place where you're able to say, Jesus, help me to forgive. And then get over the past. Our hospitals are filled with people who can't get over their past. What we do is we set our feet where we are and we head to the future. And let me tell you what, it'll be a bright one. If you haven't already discovered it, when you discover as a woman how valuable you are to Jesus, it will change who you are and how you impact this world. And let me go ahead and say this. We need you. Every woman in this room, every woman who is listening, we need you. Father, thank you for working in the lives of women. On this special day, we recognize how special they are to you. This morning, I stop and I pray for those who don't know for certain that if they were to die today, that they would have an eternity with you. And I ask that your Spirit would draw women in this place who don't know they have a relationship with you to stop right now and pray. And to say, Father, I am ready to turn myself to you. Jesus, I understand now how valuable I am to you. So I ask you to forgive me of my sin. I want you to come into my life so that I can get over my past, so that I can give myself a chance for a bright future. Jesus, I confess that you are Lord, and I ask you to be the Lord of my life. Come into my life. I want to be a Christian. I want to know that I'm going to spend an eternity with you. Now teach me to follow you. Thank you, Jesus, for saving me. This morning, if you have invited Jesus to come into your life, you have an opportunity to come and to share that decision with me. You can also mark it on your welcome card, and we will follow up with you. If God's leading you to be a part of this family of faith, you can come and share that with me. You can also mark that on your welcome card. If you want to come and pray, if you want to sit and pray, if you want to stand and pray, do that. Whatever God's asking you to do, just do what He says. Let's stand together and let's sing, "You Come" as God's Holy Spirit.